What I'm going to speak about today is a fundamental transformation that could forever change the ability of corporations to recruit, retain, and advance diverse talent in their organizations. The key to igniting the power of diversity is not in the number of diverse employees a company can attract. It is whether those diverse individuals feel included when they get there. Diversity may be the fuel for a more interesting, creative, and innovative workforce, but inclusion is the igniter of performance. No matter what side of the political spectrum you stand on when it comes to diversity, I will be sharing with you the formula for moving the diversity issue from a problem to be solved to a strength to be leveraged in building the global economy. Let me begin by telling you why I became dedicated to helping companies move from diversity to inclusion. My first lesson in the power of inclusion came when I was in middle school. For years, I had been a good student and a happy child. I got great grades, and I had friends that I'd played with on the playground and in the neighborhood after homework. One day, with very little explanation and no actual dramatic event, my clique of girlfriends informed me that they didn't like me anymore. I was out, O-U-T, out. I spent weeks feeling lost and isolated. My childlike brain convinced me that my life would never be the same. And one day, after weeks of suffering, I sobbed out the entire story to my parents. My dad was silent for a while, and then he gently put one hand on each of my cheeks, looked at me directly in the eye, and said, "Denise, anyone who doesn't like you is not worth knowing." Now, for some reason, whether it was because I was desperate to believe that at the moment or because it was true, I took those words to heart as a metaphor for the rest of my life. From that point onward, I didn't care if other people liked me enough to include me. If they didn't like me, I just assumed they weren't worth knowing and moved on. Fast forwarding through high school and a law career, focused on race, ethnicity, age, and gender discrimination, I married and took time off to raise two beautiful sons. In time, I found myself in the middle of a divorce. I had to go back to work and wasn't admitted to practice law in the state where we were then living. And so I decided to leverage my law career to build a consulting firm. While I was growing my company, I was still trying to be the perfect soccer mom as well, hurrying around in my SUV with peanut butter and jelly on the back seat, taking conference calls on mutes while the coaches were screaming at the refs. Well, it was time for my second lesson in inclusion. I was neither included in the quintessential executive club or the perfect mother club. In both camps, I felt like I was falling short, but I soon realized that feeling of exclusion was self-imposed, and then in order to build a business, become self-sustaining financially, and raise two healthy children, I needed to once again put aside my feelings that I did not belong in either group and move on. I was warned that it was a race against time to build my firm because if I couldn't demonstrate success relatively quickly, a divorce judge was going to eventually tell me to stop trying to build a business and get a real job. I was always exhausted, scared, and excited all at the same time. Sometimes I'd go to bed with what seemed like an insurmountable business problem, and I would literally dream my way through the barrier and awaken with the solution. Other times, I'd wake up suddenly from a nightmare that I had lost the race and was forced to retrain as a paralegal or a legal secretary to make ends meet. As fate would have it, and just in time, this soccer mom was acknowledged in the business community as a thought leader and a market disruptor, and ultimately, I sold that business to one of the largest consulting companies in the world and became a senior leader there. It was the exit plan I had hoped for and a legacy message to my sons that with enough hard work and passion, dreams can come true. I had moved from victim to survivor to conqueror. Now, it would be great if that were the storybook ending, like single mom makes it big, building business, single-handedly, and she joins the Fortune 100 as a senior leader, but my inclusion lessons were not over. During a period of months in my new corporate home, rather than feeling day by day that I was settling in, I was plagued by an ambiguous feeling about what was not happening at work. One day, I finally asked the head of our division how I was being received by my new colleagues, and his response, "You're very good at what you do," he said. "It's just that you're not very likable." And then he added, they all see you as being competent, but they see you as being overly aggressive. When I asked for an example of such aggressive behavior, it was brought to my attention that I had managed to accelerate an administrative process for getting an internal company website landing page for the new area of consulting I was bringing to the firm. I had accomplished this within a 3-month period, while it had apparently taken others a year or more to move this through the corporate strata for approval. I remember wondering in what manner could this achievement be considered aggressive rather than diligent or efficient. Advice from my supervisor suggested that I might benefit from a softer touch or a more go-along attitude, neither of which describe the tenacity of any sort of innovator or thought leader I have ever known. The entrepreneur that was at the core of my being, the best part of my talent, began to die. Despite my father's assurances that anyone who didn't like me was not worth knowing, the consequences of exclusion were significantly higher than being left out of a middle school clique or a self-imposed sense of exclusion from some assumed definition of the perfect mom or professional. This was the opportunity of a lifetime in a senior leadership position in one of the most important institutions in America, and all the qualities that oddly seemed to define a successful businessman were somehow personified in me as the abrasive businesswoman. I learned that this is actually very common among senior female leaders. In fact, in one Forbes study of men and women's performance reviews at 28 companies, women were 30% more likely to be criticized and asked to change aggressive behavior. This particular advice appeared in 75% of all critical reviews received by women. In contrast, aggression was mentioned only 3 times in the men's reviews, twice with an encouragement to demonstrate more of it. My informal education in my new corporate home had begun rather silently with what was not happening, but that silence ultimately became a deafening message that I could no longer ignore. When you are on a baseball team, no one comes up to you and says, "You won't be batting today." Your name simply doesn't appear on the lineup. When you're at a school dance, there's no public announcement over the microphone that you will be sitting this one out. You're simply not asked to dance. At a certain point, perhaps the 10th or 11th game or dance, you may just resign yourself to the fact that you will be there to take up space, or you may decide not to go anymore. We all have to be motivated, aligned, respected, and appreciated in order to be at our best. Corporate teams, in order to be successful and efficient, have to operate like the pit crew at a racetrack. The car pulls into the pit lane for a new set of tires and a fresh tank of gas. The 6-person pit crew jumps off the concrete ledge in an instant. The jack man thrusts the right side up while 2 tire changers zip off the wheels with an impact wrench and replaces them. The fueler hoists the gas can above her head, funneling the liquid into the car's tank. She removes the can and the jackman drops the tires back onto the pavement. Team members do not sit around second-guessing whether the fueler has the strength to hoist the gas can, and there's no room for the fueler to doubt her ability to do what she needs to do effectively and in cadence with the others on her team. The success of the team depends on everyone being fully engaged and focusing on the business objective at hand, not on whether they belong there. Realizing that the best of who I was as a professional was the part of me I most needed to hide in my new environment, the drive and the motivation to bring my best self to work and collaborate with others with excellence wafted away. I decided that if there was a game to play or a dance to attend, that I would define the rules and the structure. So I left corporate life to re-embrace the entrepreneur that lives in me. I took all the innovative thought, the intellectual property, the passion, and the drive that I would have used in my corporate American workplace, and I channeled it into my new business, which is focused on the connection between inclusion and business performance. Now, the second business is even more successful than the first, and in a scorekeeping scenario, Perhaps we can tally, score 1 for me, score 0 for corporate America. But what we're really looking for is not a win-lose scenario, but rather a way for all of us to succeed in the business ecosystem so that the global economy can thrive. There is no corporate governance textbook or scholar that disagrees with the concept that diversity promotes a better understanding of the marketplace, its opportunities, and its risks. Studies show that beliefs, attitudes, and cognitive functioning vary systematically around the demographic variables of gender, race, and age. Experts from Deloitte to McKinsey to the World Economic Forum agree that a more diverse marketplace of suppliers, customers, and investors requires a more diverse executive team. They also agree that diversity increases creativity, innovation, and more effective problem solving, all of which are key to the balanced decision-making required for business success. So what's the quandary? With regard to women, some say that there simply isn't enough talent in the talent pool to choose from, but that's simply not true. There are plenty of women out there with a variety of educational backgrounds, communication styles, and life experience. Why is it then that we start with 56% of women in the workplace at entry level and peter out to a mere 6% at senior levels of leadership and only 13% on corporate boards? In fact, the New York Times recently reported that of the S&P 1500, there are fewer women CEOs represented than there are men named John. Why don't we see a proportionate number of women leading organizations? And why aren't there black and brown faces in our boardrooms that are commensurate with the number of talented people of color? Why do the top rungs of American corporate society still look more like our white founding fathers prior to women's suffrage than the melting pot that is currently known as the United States of America? Well, the answer lies in the fact that while we hurry around to make sure that we have the right number of women, people of color, veterans, and other legislatively protected individuals, we've left the inclusion out of diversity and inclusion. We invite diverse people into our organizations, but do not extend to them a culture of belonging. We bring diverse people into the room, but do not give them a seat at the table. Those who make it to the table often do not get to speak, and those who speak are often not heard or validated. The signs of unconscious bias are often so amorphous and unprovable that the person experiencing it hardly knows whether they're dreaming, paranoid, or overly sensitive. The impact often occurs based on what is not happening rather than what is happening. It's the phone call to a colleague that is not returned, the invitation to a conference call or a meeting that is not received, the call to speak in an event that does not come, the client introduction that never happens. It's the murmur in the hallway that she's too aggressive, and other unconscious bias infiltrating a seemingly neutral performance review process. It's the rumor that she's unlikable, rather than the objective evaluation of her work that begins the downward spiral from highly motivated, out-of-the-box innovator to confused persona non grata who wants to limp home and curl up into a ball rather than deliver resounding, cutting-edge innovation that could change the global economy. So how can we help our leaders lead inclusively in order to secure, retain, and advance the best talent in whatever shape, size, gender, or race it comes in? We have to do a better job of educating them on what inclusive leadership is. The simple formula of inclusive leadership boils down to 3 R's. The first R is receptive. An inclusive leader is both curious about the point of view and ideas of others and accepting of team member differences. When a leader is receptive, our teams are more engaged and we increase ideation regarding critical business challenges. When a member of the pit crew has an idea to shave off a few seconds in the pit, the receptive leader has the team experiment during a practice lap rather than shutting her idea down before testing it. The second R is reflective. An inclusive leader is aware of biases that may impact their decisions and interactions. When a leader is reflective, organizations benefit from increased talent retention and advancement of diverse talent through the talent pipeline. The reflective leader is the one who fully considers whether to hire a woman to work in the racetrack pit rather than making the assumption that she won't be strong enough to hoist the gas can over her shoulder. The third R is revitalizing. An inclusive leader inspires a team by empowering them to ideate, achieve, and contribute at every level of the organization. If a leader is revitalizing, all are motivated to achieve excellence. Even if an idea comes from the water boy or water girl in the pit, the revitalizing leader not only acknowledges that team member, but inspires him or her to learn to drive the car or own their own race car company someday. Diversity may be the fuel for a more interesting, creative, and innovative workforce, but inclusion is the igniter of performance. In my new company, I have seen organizational performance results that defied my greatest expectations. When a division of one of our financial services clients allowed us to develop an inclusive leadership innovation incubator focused on how inclusive behaviors support design thinking, employee engagement and innovation increased by an average of 15 percentage points in that region. When one of our logistics clients let us assess their cross-cultural inclusive behaviors and opened its eyes to the localization of its sales process in China to the needs, beliefs, and relationship style of their Chinese customers, sales increased by 32%. When one of our biggest pharmaceutical clients implemented our recommendation to provide a formal mechanism to hear the quieter voices in its lower ranks, a female scientist came forward with the most important drug discovery of the year. No one of us is as smart as all of us. That's an old adage that transcends time. Its application to any group of people, a team, a family, a nation, a corporation, is undeniable. Both research and experience proves we're better together when we work in an environment that is both diverse and inclusive. People of color thrive in a workplace where white leaders invite them to share the podium, the boardroom, and the executive ranks. If you are in the power seat and the seats around you are not reflective of racial diversity, reach out and develop high potential employees who will create a more diverse leadership bench. Women advance more quickly with male champions. If you're a man, reach out to champion a woman you believe has leadership potential. Support her for promotion and rally around her when she falters. Millennials perform better with champions of the aging workforce. If you're a Gen X or a boomer, open your mind to the benefits of surrounding yourself with a native digital rising star and share the wisdom that can only come from decades of experience. Recent research from Deloitte, for example, shows as much as a 90% increase in company innovation when millennials feel that they are in an inclusive work culture. The business case for inclusion is powered by conclusive data and research, but it's also powered by common sense of the human condition that all of us need to be fed. Belonging feeds us with love, the single most important need after food, water, and shelter. When we belong, we show up to our lives with joy and purpose in everything we do, including our work. I am not a hero because I was able to move from victim to survivor to conqueror in my own life. But we can be heroes together if we manage to improve the lives of others so that they can bring their full potential to our organizations and to this global economy.